So I recently bought myself a Galaxy Note 9 and I've been feeling like a boss. Sure, it was a bit of an expense, a bit of a splurge, but you're not going to get those kinds of specs without spending that kind of money. Well, that is unless you get yourself a Pocophone F1. You guys have been really interested in this phone, and for good reason, because it basically has a $1,000 spec sheet for more like $300. So why did I spend so much money on a Note 9? Look, this might have the same specs on paper, but there's no way this thing's going to perform as well as a Note 9 in the real world. Wait, so the Pocophone F1 actually has better performance in benchmarks than the Galaxy Note 9. Now granted, I'm using the British Galaxy Note 9 with the Exynos processor, not the Snapdragon, but still, this is really impressive. Pocophone is an offshoot of Xiaomi, a company that's well known for crafting devices with specs that belie their low prices. Of course, the way to achieve this is by making compromises and cutting corners elsewhere, normally where the manufacturers hope you aren't going to notice. They're gambling that customers will value the raw specs more than those additional flagship luxuries. This way, the Pocophone F1 manages to bring a Snapdragon 845 with 6GB of RAM and 64GB of storage for around just $300. There are also variants that come with 8GB of RAM and 128 or 256GB of storage. There's even a 4000 mAh battery in here. So just what are those compromises and how much do they hurt the overall experience? So looking at it right away, you can see that this isn't a premium flagship device. It doesn't have the unibody glass and metal frame that those really expensive $1,000 phones have. However, it has a polycarbonate, i.e. plastic back, and it's actually not that bad. Of course, it's not as premium or as weighty feeling as a glass phone, but it brings its own advantages. Plastic back phones aren't as fingerprinty, they're not as likely to break if you drop them, and actually it's got a nice finish on it, it's nice and smooth, and I think it's quite cool. I personally don't think it looks or feels cheap. It's lighter, but I felt much worse. There's also a Kevlar edition, which is awesome because that's what Batman's suit is made out of. Call quality is absolutely fine and I had no problems with reception. You do get a headphone jack and there's a very speedy fingerprint sensor around the back. And it's USB Type-C, so none of this micro USB crap. It also supports Quick Charge 4.0 and has a basic splash resistance thanks to a company called P2i that provided a nano coating process. Just don't take it in the bath with you. There's no wireless charging or IP rating, but on the whole this phone offers more than you would expect for the price in terms of these added comforts. The screen is a 6.18-inch Full HD IPS LCD display. There's a notch which might be a bummer for some, and it's also a strangely large notch with only a little screen on either side. Looks quite similar to the iPhone actually. Corners are quite rounded, which is likewise an acquired taste as it cuts off a bit of screen real estate down the bottom and at the top. It doesn't have the stunning deep blacks found on AMOLEDs, but it's certainly sharp and bright enough to be very enjoyable for consuming media and gaming. And those dual-facing speakers, yes you heard right, are also very welcome in both those scenarios. In fact, this is a great gaming phone all round. The performance is actually superior to that found on a Razer phone thanks to the newer processor. Games perform incredibly well and look crisp on the HD display. I've even been able to enjoy a little GameCube emulation with just about acceptable performance. That's my personal gold standard when it comes to Android gaming. There's even a water cooling system to help prevent throttling and overheating. Another area where we often see compromise is the camera department, but again, the story isn't half as bad as I was expecting. For starters, you get a dual lens rear camera that's used for those bokeh effects. That's a 12 megapixel primary lens with an f1.9 aperture and a secondary 5 megapixel depth sensor. And around the front is an actually rather impressive 20 megapixel shooter with an f2.0 aperture. Video can be shot at 30 frames per second at 2160p around the back and 1080p around the front. So how do photos and videos turn out? Actually, again, not bad. When you zoom right in, there's a little detail missing and some noise creeps in low light settings. Focusing can sometimes be a little tricky and contrast could perhaps be a little higher. You're not going to mistake these pictures for a Pixel or a Galaxy, but with that said, they're also not bad at all. In fact, this is probably one of the more reliable budget cameras I've used. There's good dynamic range, pleasing saturation, and the auto mode does a great job of compensating for different environments and lighting. And there's a pro mode if you'd rather take matters into your own hands. Having a 20 megapixel front-facing camera is also a very welcome inclusion. Comparisons have been made with the OnePlus line and by extension the Nexus phones. This makes sense given that this is a device that provides excellent specs for less, without much in the way of bells and whistles. That doesn't mean you'll be getting a completely stock Android experience though. Rather, the Poco F1 is running the MIUI 9.6 layer on top of Android 8.1, which does mean a little bloat and some occasionally irritating decisions. But otherwise, things run smoothly, settings are where you expect them to be, and it doesn't really impede matters at all. The performance on this phone means that productivity tasks and multitasking are a breeze, and the massive battery is put to great use with some stellar longevity. So then the question becomes, why spend more on a real flagship phone? Did I waste my money on the Galaxy Note 9? In my opinion, not really. After all, the Note 9 brings wireless charging, true water resistance, has a higher res AMOLED curve to display, it has a crazy good camera. I'm a tech reviewer, I love all that extra stuff. What I'm trying to say is that the Pocophone F1 doesn't really have its own thing, and it doesn't have that luxurious feeling of the very top end. There's nothing extra here to make you really sit up and take notice, other than that price of course, and it's not flashy in any way. But that's it. The compromise here isn't so much that the fundamentals have been half-arsed, rather it's just that there isn't anything additional, and that's going to be perfectly fine for a lot of people. This is a phone that manages to do all the basics incredibly well, at a budget that makes it very compelling. If performance is your main priority, then it's very hard to beat in its price category. Stay tuned to the channel and the site for more content, where I'll be pitting the Poco F1 against the Honor Play and the OnePlus 6 to see just how disruptive it really is. I've been Adam Shinitsky. I hope you've enjoyed this video review and found it useful. If you did, then please consider leaving a like and sharing it around. That helps us out immensely. Comment down below and let us know what you think of the Poco F1. Will you be buying, or do you need a little more pizzazz in your devices? Hit subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this, tap the bell button to get notified of videos as they come out, and of course check out AndroidAuthority.com, for we are your source for all things Android.